work on your pitch, get hung up on 50 times a day, and get better. And if you do, you'll get some sales and you'll get some commission and we'll be fine. And if you don't want to, we're not going to force you to pick up the phone. We're not going to force you we're not forcing you to come in. We'll just have another training class and bring someone else in.
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Rashad Yearby, and this is Unfiltered Conversations. And we're here with Bryan. He helps people break into sales with a lot more honesty than hype. He builds his work around rejection, resilience, and how to become a real professional in the field most people truly misunderstand. Bryan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Michael.
No problem. You built pitching sales for people at the beginning of their journey, not the polished veteran at the end of their journey, right? So what do you still remember most clearly about the early stages and what was the confusion moments when you was trying to, get it all started?
Yeah, it still feels like yesterday, even though I've been in it for about 15 years now. And I think if you talk to anybody in sales, they can tell you exactly where and when and the setting of their first office and their first managers. It's something that really sticks with you. And then it's just become this long, extended journey that it just kind of kept building on itself.
Mhm.
But like you said, the beginning of the journey is something that is so underappreciated by a lot of people because realistically, you're only talking to the people that have made it that 15 years and you forget about the people that have got lost in the mix early on, didn't make it, pivoted to different careers because they just didn't get the right help or information or mentorship that they really needed to get to that next level.
Wow, that's amazing. On your website, you offer yourself as more of a confidant, not just a coach. What have you learned about how much fear and shame new salespeople carry before they even miss their quota?
Yeah, what you find out is that a lot of journeys are similar. Um,
Mhm.
but there's just so many companies and training programs and office settings, depending on where you're located in, the world in general and who you get put with as a manager and who you get set up with as a mentor in a new company. There's a thousand ways that this industry does it.
Mhm.
But there's so many overlapping familiarities that most people are going through, especially when it comes to those early stages of fear, of rejection, of ego, of new experiences that they haven't felt yet. And they've probably heard some things about sales and maybe they've been told they're born for sales. And then when they get into it, it's different than what they expected. Or again, they talk to somebody who's been in it for 20 years and like, oh yeah, you'd be great for this and that. And then they get to start really feeling the hardships that come with those beginning stages. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where I'm trying to fill a gap where the unfortunate part with people getting into sales is there's tons of people being brought in, but the help isn't really getting to them until they get past that beginning
Mhm.
6-month to 1 year phase before resources are really allocated to them to the next step because they want to find out if they can make it through that difficult period at the beginning. And if they do, then they'll take the time. But during that period, so many people that could be good and could have a long, great career in this profession don't make it because they don't get that help.
So what do people need emotionally before, I guess, they get the what you're talking about, the tactics and the techniques in sales?
Yeah, they have to learn a process like anything
Mhm.
else. They have to learn early on that the sale is not the be all end all of getting better at sales. It's learning it in bite-sized chunks and gaining confidence and overcoming rejection and all these little factors that stack on top of each other to
Mhm.
get you to the next stage. They just get so keyholed into I have to make a sale, I have to make money, I have to make this quota, which are factors, don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
anyone can get lucky and stumble into a sale, but are you actually learning something from every interaction you're having with people? Are you getting tangible information and feedback back from every call that you're making or every door that you knock on or every sales call that you make? That's what leads to being good. These steps to success, not the be all end all of getting the sale. And I think that's what people lose sight of. It's like any skill that you gain, any sport that you play. There's little skill sets that need to be built through pattern and habit and good, and also making sure they're not growing poor habits that are ultimately going to lead to a downfall or a ceiling of their success. And all these things are being incorporated at a time where you're nervous and scared and you don't know where to turn. And it can spiral really quickly in sales. It
Yeah.
really can if you have this thought of what it's going to be like and then it turns out not to be.
Yeah.
And you really need someone that's going to help build you up, mentor you, answer your questions, and kind of guide you through this maze that you're going through early on. And if you can find that and you start to have those aha moments over and over again, then you're off and running and building on and finding that success. But it does not happen overnight. People think that it's just talking to people and getting sales, and there's just so much more to it that
Mhm.
maybe they weren't told about early. And then they're stuck figuring out themselves, and it can be a difficult, very difficult thing to overcome early on.
A lot of people that I know, especially when they talk about sales, they automatically think it's manipulative. And you kind of push back on that idea.
Mhm.
So what do people misunderstand about good sales personnel because of the bad ones that they encountered?
I love that question, and I love to answer it because I get it all the time, and I do believe there is a misconception for people that are outside of sales,
Mhm.
and that is that they're manipulative, that they're pushy, that they're brash, and they're only in it for their commission check. And I
Mm,
can't say that those people aren't out there. There's going to be people like that in any industry, and in sales, you are going to run into that. Problem is people really only recognize bad salespeople that they've encountered. They remember
mm.
that used car salesman, that not to center them out, but or they're going for appliances or furniture or whatever the case may be, in whatever situation, they remember that person at the mall that pulled them aside and tried to get them to buy something right away. And when they said no, they wouldn't let them go, and all these things.
Mhm.
What they don't realize is they're encountering very good professional salespeople every day or
Mm,
every week when they're out doing it, but they don't recognize it because those people are so good at what they do. And they've actually taken the pain points that those people are experiencing and solved them and led them in the right direction, even though it wasn't the most expensive thing that they're going to make the most commission on. They asked really good questions. They dug deeper than those surface level feelings that the customer was feeling, and actually
mhm,
got to the root of what they're looking for and needed to help them with, and did so. And they walk away feeling like they figured that out themselves. And the best salespeople help the customer and consumer figure things out for themselves just by leading them in the right direction. And those are the
mm.
true professionals that they're running into every day that they don't realize. So
Yeah,
in their head, they only have the bad salespeople standing out.
yeah.
And that's where they get this idea and this impression of this profession that I
Mhm.
take a lot of pride in. And that's why I love answering that question, because there's so many good people out there that are looking after them, that are only
Yeah.
there to help provide for their own family and doing a really good job for it and solving people's problems. And they're out there everywhere and they're doing it every day to a high standard. And those salespeople, they get recognized within the profession, but not everybody sees it on a day-to-day basis.
And man, you're not wrong. And thank you for basically going and giving a detailed description of what a clean sale feels like, right? So I asked you this question: what in your tenure is the fastest way a sales rep can lose trust with a potential client?
When they put themselves first, when they look
Mm,
at what is in it for them when that
mhm,
customer approaches them. That is the fastest
mm.
way to lose trust with any customer. The second that they get their spidey senses tingling because they feel uneasy with that person. I hate giving examples because it's all over the place,
Yeah,
but
got you.
when you look at things that people do all the time, it's not like a niche profession. But as I
Mhm,
said, when everybody's bought a car, but well, not everybody, but people are buying cars all the time, or houses all the time, and they set like, hey, I really have this budget that I have to stay within. And the next thing you know, that salesperson is pushing them outside of their budget and almost making them feel uncomfortable like right away because they're thinking in their head, well, if I sell them something more, I'll get more.
yeah.
Right. Now, some people sometimes have unrealistic expectations when they say, I want this, that, and the other thing within this budget. Well, that's just not possible. But when they're very clear about what they're looking for and what they're looking to solve, a good salesperson is going to stay within those parameters as best they can, or have a very honest conversation with that customer about how maybe that's not realistic and maybe this
Mhm.
is what they're going to have to do to solve those problems. But
Wow.
that will be understood hopefully by that customer when they talk to that salesperson. So the number one way to lose trust in a salesperson is when they realize they're not they're in it for themselves and not for helping you.
Thank you. And thank you for being honest with that because I know a lot of times it's very difficult because I know you're in a profession of helping, right? The sales personnel be a better sales professional. And so I don't want that question to, I guess, cascade in a negative light of, when we're talking about sales personnel and people and like that. So thank you for being honest and open with that. Your public footprint still shows you close to active sales work while also like I believe you're, and with your book, you're mentoring and you're writing. How has it helped you staying in that work, kept you I guess, honest in advising individuals?
Well, I think when you talk about trust, I think that people that do reach out to me that are in this profession hopefully do trust me because I have usually, well, I have nothing to gain from helping them and be excel at what they're doing, but
Mhm,
I'm in it every day too. I'm not sitting here on the back end of my career saying, well, I did this and look at the success I found. I'm still, if I'm going to give advice to somebody, it's something that I should be doing myself. And that makes it so much
mhm,
easier to talk about because I'm giving them real life examples that I did maybe the week before, the month before, or I can come up with a scenario that I went through recently that maybe applies to what they're asking about. And, I didn't, it was anything but a walk in the park getting started for me in sales too. So when these people are new to it and they're like, well, my manager seems to be pushing me or neglecting me or things like that, I usually look to them to step outside of the box. And sometimes they need to show some initiative that they're not going to find because just because they're a manager doesn't mean that they're good at teaching somebody or being a
yeah,
mentor to somebody. Maybe they're good at some other part of managing because that position is all encompassing
mhm,
and maybe they lack it in some areas but excel in others, and you have to maybe find different ways to get that help. And I always say too, you're on the right path because you are reading books about sales, you're listening to podcasts about sales, you're putting in this extra work that people are going to appreciate that the person beside you might not be doing. So you're already one
mhm,
step ahead in looking outside of just your workplace to find answers. And then now you find this broader community of people that have dealt with the same things that you're dealing with. And now you start finding answers from different perspectives instead of being in this bubble of where you're working. And that's where
mhm,
you really start. Again, when I talk about all that overlap, you can be in different industries, you can be in different parts of the country, parts of the world, but there is a lot of it's like that Venn diagram where there's overlapping parts that
mhm,
are going to help you out. And anyone who's been in sales for 10, 5, 10, 15 years have also been in it for that 1 year and usually can
mhm.
give some sage advice to help you out a little bit. And as I always tell them, I said, the fact that we're talking or the fact that you've, grabbed my book and read it means you're doing the right steps. Now we just got to start applying it on a day-to-day basis and building that foundation and habits that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast here.
So, and you kind of alluded to it, but what has sales taught you lately that it was kind of mind blowing to you?
Sales will teach you something every day if you're out there and having these conversations. Now, and I don't mean that as a cop out answer. The one thing that I always talk about is that anybody can do sales. People think that you have to be a certain personality type to be good at sales. You have to be, like I said, some people think it's that brash, manipulative person. Some people think it's that talkative person that they go to a party and they command a room and, everyone seems to be drawn to them. Sure, those people have a good chance at being good at it if they can harness it and use it properly. But so can the person that is able to read people a little bit better than maybe some people are so focused on talking and leading the room that they forget to listen and they forget to again maybe
Mhm,
ask the right questions because they're doing more of the talking than
mhm,
hearing the customer. So you can take somebody who's got a shy personality, but they're attentive and they pay attention to little things. And maybe they study the features and benefits of a product a little bit better, or maybe they know something more technical than the person who's just building relationships. So I find it crazy after 15 years, I've run into every type of person under the sun that have had success. And I've also seen the people that are born for sales and have these qualifications that people from the outside the profession see and think, "Oh, you must be," that can't make it because they can't get
Yeah.
out of their own way, right, and
Mhm.
harness it. So that's what teaches me is you run into new people that are getting into this industry and like, "Oh, you know what? I never looked at it from that perspective because I'm
Yeah.
more this type and you're more that type and you have a different way of approaching the same situation and neither one is better. It's just who uses it to the best of their own abilities."
That's amazing. That is truly innovative, and thank you.
Mhm.
I love that detailed question, that
Yeah.
detailed answer to the question.
But that's what again, it's something people don't think of until they see it in action. I'm like, you hear a situation that comes up and somebody
Yeah.
else describes how they handle it, and you're like, "I never would have thought of that." And you're like, "Man, that's great. I wanna take that a little piece of that from you and
Mhm.
learn and incorporate that because that's" it blows you it blows you away, like, now I got that little piece because I learned from that person. Oh, but this person does it complete opposite way. I'm gonna take a little bit from there. And you're constantly evolving your own product by learning from these people.
Have you always been good at sales?
No.
No?
No, I don't like, some days I don't feel like I'm good at it still. It's a
Mm.
very humbling profession. It's not like, somebody who learns a skill of, I don't know, hemming and all these things where they can pick up a needle and thread and day in and day out they're creating these masterpieces because they've done it. Sales every day you're figuring it out over and over again a different
Mm,
way and what worked yesterday doesn't work today. And the
yeah,
person you dealt with yesterday, you can give the person beside them the exact same pitch and that person's like, I don't want to have anything to do with that, but you sold to this person. So it's hard to like so the short answer is no, I haven't been, and I'm still learning. And I always say it would take you 100 lifetimes to learn everything and digest everything you can about sales.
yeah. So
So, yeah,
I guess, was sales your first profession though? Or
I
your
wasn't
first.
planning on getting into it.
Okay.
It was something that I started with in university, and I kinda just fell on my face a little bit. I did it as a summer job to make some
Mm,
money while I was going to school. I was going to school for business and marketing and, kinda human relations type of thing, which all ended up working well into a sales
mhm,
profession, but I didn't think I would be in it. So but what I did find is that, I can be competitive with myself more so
yeah,
than the people around me, but very internally competitive with myself and improving things to me. And when I got into sales, that just churned that fire. And I was like, this is fun because
mm,
you get to be a different person to each time you interact with somebody
that's
and you
true.
meet them and they have this quirky personality. You're like, now I get to be quirky with them.
Mm,
And then you meet somebody who's, shy and quiet and maybe more stoic. And you're like, okay, I can match that energy and
mm,
see. And you just get to kind of wear all these things without, again, that doesn't mean you're being manipulative and changing who you are. You're just adapting.
yeah, you mirror. Yeah,
Right? You
100%.
kinda become that chameleon that adapts to the situation, and
Mm,
that's fun because every day then doesn't become like, sales is the least monotonous job you can have. You get to
yeah,
go out and experience new things all the time when you're out in the field and seeing people. It can be monotonous if you're, dialing cold calls, which I did. I did that for 3 years. I cold called for 3 years, so don't think that, just because I get to drive around and go see customers now, doesn't mean I didn't go through the gauntlet of cold calling. So, there's could be somebody listening that's doing cold calls, be like, "I'll tell you monotonous.
yeah.
This is painful." Yeah, okay, I hear you. But now I used to have fun with it as best I used to change my accents up and do things that I was calling people, like, you'll go a little bit zany if you don't, have some fun with it. You have competitions internally with people you work with, but, as you grow and get better and kind of move but you have to, like, um, grow those calluses early on
Yeah,
with cold calling, whatever, but, so to get back to it, it can become a very non-monotonous job and you actually get out there and you meet different people and again you hone different skills based on who you're talking to and then as you learn about that person a little bit more you adapt and it's just a wonderful syncrasy and again as long as you're at the forefront of helping that person then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
you're no stranger to tough times, especially in sales. I did some research on you, and before sales, football was like a huge part of your identity. And also found out, and when you tore your ACL for the first time, what changed inside you to go beyond your that physical injury part to become the person you are today?
Yeah, it was the first major adversity that I had
Oh,
felt. Now, people face adversity in different ways throughout their life. Now, I had always been an athlete as an identity that I had for myself. I had taken it very seriously. I was a multi-sport athlete and then pursued football to its highest level that I had reached.
Yeah.
And then when I had that injury, it kind of just takes all the air out of the balloon that you've been building for years and years and years. And then it's all taken away in one moment. And all of a sudden the realization of like maybe like all athletes, while they're in it, and whether it's professional or collegiate or high school, they don't think it's always in the back of your mind, like, hey, is this something I can pursue forever? And a lucky few get to do that and get paid to do that as a profession, and all the credit to them. But the majority of people don't. And that end comes abruptly. And
Mm.
what ended up happening was I retore it a second time.
Ugh.
And I had worked
Mm.
really, really hard to get back. And when I retore it the second time, that was like, hey, this has been a great run,
Yeah.
but there's another part of life that I have been repressing that has been bubbling. And every time I'm like, nope, I'm still, in this and competing and doing this. And then finally it was forced to come to the surface and I had to
Mm.
figure out the next step. But if anybody who's listening who's gone through either something athletically like that or another trial or tribulation in life that has forced them to reconsider the identity that they've painted for themselves their whole life, this is not an overnight thing to cope
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
And it took a long time. And then finally, through support, and we don't have to get into all that, but it was a year long kind of fight with myself to move to that next step and re identify myself. And then sales kind of reignited that passion that I had felt with athletics. And that's part of that competitiveness that I talked about. Because
Yeah.
I hate to be overtly competitive in sales when you're on a team because that can get kind of sticky where
Yeah.
you're not you feel this weird jealousy if somebody else is doing better than you, or you're trying to like that can happen, which I don't love. But what it should do is fuel you to be as good as that person or learn from that person. So if you look at somebody who's like, wow, they're good at how'd they do that? Like I can't do that. Learn from them. Don't be jealous of them. Use that, harness their abilities to make yourself better and help pull you up. Or if you're doing very well and successful, it's kind of the idea of the book, right? To help people that are coming up and you've learned something, pass it on, pay it
Mm.
forward to that person. You're not competing with that person who's on your team.
Yeah.
And then you get to have that overt competitiveness versus your competitors in the market, assuming you're doing
Mm.
that in a correct way. But that should be what fuels you competitively, not internally with your teammates, right? And people within your company. It should be out with the competitors and figuring out how to win that business while providing the proper service for your customers.
You described that first 3 years of cold calling, making fun, making fun out of the situation, changing up your accents, different things like that, internal contests and things of that nature. And also there's a dark side to it, right? High turnover, people quitting left and right. What did that baptism by fire teach you, that polish your sales training could never I guess your training never could?
Yeah, the biggest thing I learned was no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to hold my
Oof,
hand to work me through
oof,
what I was feeling. That was the first real realization that like, oh, this is they if I don't make it, there's another
yeah,
training class that's coming in 2 months to if you wanna leave, leave. We don't have time to figure out and hold your hand
yeah,
through this. So either pick up the phone and work on your pitch, get hung up on 50 times a day and get better. And if
mm,
you do, you'll get some sales and you'll get some commission and we'll be fine. If you don't want to, we're not going to force you to pick up the phone. We're
yeah,
not going to force you to come in. We'll just have another training class and bring someone else in. Now, again, I bring up the athletic part of my life because it was a significant portion of it, but I felt that before already playing competitive level sports. No one forces you to train. Your coach isn't going to knock on your door at 6 in the morning when you have training to get to and get you there. You have to get yourself there. And if
yeah.
you don't, that's fine. We'll bring someone else who will.
Uh,
So I at
Next
least
man
had
up.
some of that, but I wasn't expecting it to be quite so overlapping once I got to this side of it. And you don't have to, again, when I said anyone can do this, you don't have to come from that type of background to have that mentality. That
Mhm.
just be happened where I drew it from. And that was the wake up call, like, oh, it's either get on or get off the
Yeah.
boat because it's leaving. And I had somebody in my first job in cold calling. This girl got hired and she left at lunch. First day, she looked around, and I remember having a brief conversation with her at the morning break. And she's like, is this what people do? They just pick up the phone and dial, and there's no, like, it was chaos. It was not even controlled chaos. It was just chaos in there. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of it. And they're like, do you get a lot of sales? And I was like, no, not really. And she just went for lunch and didn't come back. And
Wow.
as you talked about the high turnover, I saw people leaving every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I was one of the most senior people on the team by my 3-month mark.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
So what small wins kept you from walking away from it all?
I was That's a good question because I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I didn't, because I actually walked away from sales for a few months. I'd say like 6 to 8 months. I walked away
Mhm.
because I was fed up with it, and then I found an opportunity. But to your first point, one, that internal competitiveness. Like, I saw other people getting sales. It wasn't like it was an impossible feat. I was just struggling with it early and in my own head because I hadn't got anything yet. And I was getting some help, and there was some fun people at the office that I worked with, and we found ways to meet. But I noticed improvement. Like, that
Mm,
was the biggest thing, is like, I was getting hung up on all the time, but by 3 months, I was getting hung up on later into the pitch. I was getting
mm,
follow-up calls. I was actually getting people calling me back after I'd had a full conversation with them,
okay.
and then it took me 8 months to get my first sale on my first cold calling job because we were selling sports packages.
Yeah,
So these were, like, not small things, and 8 months is a long time to wait for a
yeah.
sale. It's not one of these things where you're selling little trinkets for $5. Like, these were $25,000 packages, and you're calling people out of the blue to sell that. Like, it's a long process, right? So the little wins were growing, but once I got them, I was like, okay, well, I think I really improved in this, but there's
Yeah.
no way I want to stay where I am. So yeah, I was like, that's enough. Like, I had to know when to call it quits. So when that day came, I felt I had I felt I had grown enough in
I
my
get it.
role to be like, I think I can take this to a different level. But I look at that as such a love-hate relationship with that first job, because I learned so much about myself and what I could do, but I
Mm.
also knew when to say that's enough. There's gotta be something better out there.
Now, you have openly talked about having a mentor is pivotal for the growth of a sales professional. How did you learn the difference between someone who truly guided you and cared for your development and growth in that such a short period where turnover was high versus someone who's just using your hunger for their own purposes?
It's a great question, and it's such a hard thing to differentiate, because
Mm,
somebody who is trying to use you in that sense is usually pretty good at it, unfortunately. And I have been in situations where I kind of figured that was happening to me,
mm,
but at the same time, I've had some of the most unbelievable mentors that I would not be here in the positions I'm in and had the longevity of the career I've had so far without them. So you have to take the good with the bad when it comes to this, because to say that there aren't some people out there trying to take advantage for their own good, it's just not the case. And it'd be
mm,
naive to think that that wasn't the case.
mm,
So the hard thing is, you're going to have to learn that yourself. You have to get that feeling.
mm.
You have to ask questions, see if you're getting weird answers, seeing if it's almost impossible to explain. You have to feel it.
Yeah.
And when you get a good mentor, you will know, because it'll be
Okay.
so much different than somebody else that you've dealt with, that you're like, these people truly care, that
Yeah.
you wanna give back to them as
Mm,
much as they's given to you. That's
yeah.
the feeling you're gonna get when you found somebody good, and that's just a feel. And unfortunately, it might take 1 or 2 bad ones. Not saying for sure, but it might take 1 or 2 bad ones before you find the ones that really are truly gonna inspire you to be better and how to be better, and they'll
Mm,
take time out of their day. And I always say the best way to find a mentor is you have to be falling forward constantly. You can't be sitting at your desk twiddling your thumbs and expect a mentor to walk up to you and be like, "Hey, I noticed you're not doing anything. Can I help you?" No, they want to see the person who's constantly picking up the phone and not getting frustrated and asking good questions, and showing that resiliency, that, hey, you know what? I'm going to take time and effort out of my own career to help you because I see
mm,
what you're doing and I believe that you can be good at this, and
sure.
I'm going to help you. And this is what I'm seeing. And these are little tidbits. And then you put those tidbits and advice into action and ask follow up questions like, hey, I tried what you talked about. This is the feedback I got. You're like,
Mm.
perfect. You're listening, you're putting things into actionable plans. That's when a mentor is gonna keep doing it, not
Mm,
the person who's sitting there with their head down being like, "I feeling sorry for yourself." It's gonna be the person that's constantly, even if they're running into a brick wall, they're still running full speed day in, day out.
mhm,
That person is gonna say, "Man, I like the way this guy works. He reminds me of a younger self," or whatever the case may be, or he's running into the same problems I ran into until someone helped me out. I'm gonna go again, pay it forward. That's
mm,
almost a responsibility of a good salesperson, is
mm.
to find that. Your job is not to, again, do it for the person. It's
Yeah.
help the people that are willing to do it. They just need that guidance that you can offer. And I'm a huge believer in that, because there's not a single good sales professional that can't point to a few mentors that helped them out through the dark times early on. And you should
Mhm.
100% be paying it forward, because you owe it to the next generation of salespeople.
So with that, having a good mentor, does it ever backfire? And what I mean by this is like in my career field, I'm in the military and maintenance. So a lot of times when someone takes you under their wing, a lot of people can get jealous and rivals or individuals that, want that mentor for themselves. And do that happen in sales where those people try to sabotage you by giving you kind of like bad advice? And has that ever cost you? Have you ever received bad advice and has that ever cost you anything?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it is a very competitive profession, and
Mhm,
people, especially when they work on high commissions
mhm,
or commission only, and they're looking out for providing for their family, for themselves, for people that rely on them, you can start to see sides of people that aren't in your best interest, and they aren't in the best interest of the
mm,
company, and they aren't in the best interest of the profession. But once again, it'd be naive to think that it wasn't out there.
yeah,
The best advice I can give to that, and once again, it will be situational, and I'm sure, like you
yeah,
said, you've run into it too. And I have had to leave a company because of a few individuals that had that mindset. It was a commission only, and I had to make a decision to leave that company because of what people around me were doing that I didn't agree with.
uh,
And so I've had to make that decision. It's not something that you just make one day. It is something I kind of had to build a case to myself about if this was going to be, if I'm just walking down the wrong path, and the further you go, the longer it takes you to turn around, or do you look elsewhere? And that's very much like the mentorship that we talked about earlier, where you have to get a feeling for this. You have to wonder if there is somebody else that's sneaking around, running your name through the mud, maybe saying
yeah,
something to your mentor to, again, sabotage you. There's no right way to handle these situations because of what they happen, but they happen. And I think the
yeah,
best advice you can have is don't go in there just ignorant to the fact it won't happen to you or it won't happen in your company.
yeah,
But usually you hope that those people haven't got to the position where it can sabotage your own career and your own ability to make money. And you have to know when to walk away from a situation. You have to know when a situation's worth fighting for, and let your own character do the talking instead of someone else
yeah.
for you. You have to build up your own reputation instead of relying on somebody else providing, it for you. But it's such a difficult area to navigate, especially when you get
I
into these
bet.
bubbles. Like, I know you're saying this from experience, and I've seen it, but to tell someone who hasn't experienced it yet, it's so situational.
Mhm,
You honestly, it's listening to your intuition is the best way that
yeah,
I could. I actually talked about it in my book on the mentorship part that I talk about, is that
yeah,
there are bad mentors out there that are in it for themselves, and you have to use your intuition, and it might mean you get burned one or two times, and hopefully it's not a catastrophic thing, but you also can't let it stop you from you can't be so walled off from it happening to you that you don't allow good people into your career, because though you have to depend on these people to progress, you can only get so far on your own. You need
mhm,
these people around you. You're going to help other people, and other people are going to help you. So you
yeah,
can't think you can just, you know what, I got screwed over once, I'm going to just do this myself.
yeah,
That is a career limiting move as well. So you
yeah.
have to constantly be evolving, using your intuition, and navigating things like this that are bound to happen eventually when you're in a professional.
You said it, everything changes for someone who goes from a sales job to building a sales career. For
Mhm.
you, what changed in that? What was that mindset shift inside that sentence for you that framed your life journey?
Yeah. the very like I don't remember the exact moment, but I remember the time frame when I did start to see a little success. The work I had been putting in
Mhm.
was building and I was getting better. I was getting more comfortable. You don't realize it one day. You look back and you're like, you know what? I've been told no like the last 50 calls and I don't care.
Yeah.
I lost this deal I'd been working on and man, did it suck. But I also just picked up the phone and started calling again and realized
Mm,
that's what so the mind shift is realizing I'm going to do this as a profession. And once you make that shift, like I'm going to use this profession to, as my career to provide for myself and my family
mhm,
and the people who rely on me.
mm.
When you make that shift, there are dramatic changes that you have to make to your behaviors and your habits because that's like step one. That's almost going back to the beginning because if you're taking a summer sales job, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever. You're kind of if I sell something, I sell something. I'm out of here in a couple months, anyways. But
yeah.
if you're like, well, if I don't sell something, maybe the rent doesn't get paid. If I don't sell
Yeah,
this,
that's
maybe
true.
I can't go out and have the social life I'm used to having. So what do I need to do to not only maintain what I'm having, but build on it? And doing that is when you start doing everything behind the scenes better and then putting into
Mm,
practice when you show up at the office. Not let me get better when I'm at the office. Now, are you reading books in your spare time? Are you listening to audiobooks when you're driving or on public transit? Are you going out with mentors and being like, "Hey, can I go on a sales call with you or listen in? Like, I'll just kind of be a fly on the wall. Hey, I know you're
mhm,
presenting to that customer. Can I just watch the presentation?" You start to be like, "Well, how do I get better?" And the best part about sales that I will say any day of the week is that anything that you implement and learn in sales, you can give
yeah.
yourself a raise the next day. And there are
Okay.
so few professions that you can do that where you are reliant on yourself and mentors. I said, can't wall yourself off and just do it alone. But the work you put in behind the scenes, if I read an audio or listen to an audiobook and I'm like, oh, that's a great, I can implement it the next day and get a sale
Mm,
and get a
yeah.
commission on that. I just gave
Wow.
myself a raise and then build on that and then on that. And then, okay, well, I'll read another book. I'll listen to another podcast. Let me sit on like my mentor just presented something. I didn't even think of that. Let me implement that.
Mhm,
And you're just giving yourself raises over and over and over again. And that's building a career. And that's putting in the
mhm,
work behind the scenes that isn't getting shown to you on your 9 to 5 job. If you only work 9 to 5 in sales for your whole life, you don't get to clock in and clock out and turn your brain off
mm,
and say, no, you have to be doing things outside of the office to get better. Then you implement it, then you build on it. And that's now you're building a career in sales. And if you don't want to do that, you honestly shouldn't be in it because I think it's Zig Ziglar. I like saying this.
yeah.
It's the easiest low paying job and it's the hardest high paying job you can have. Because if
Mm,
you want to just clock in and get your base salary, this is not the profession for you. It's not enough to
exactly.
sustain any lifestyle. And there's no salesperson that says, yeah, my base salary is good. I don't need to make sales. That's how you build a career, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
People are multifaceted, and you publicly kind of argue successfully, I might add, that you have to simply, and you said it here on this podcast, that you have to simply be yourself
Mhm.
in sales. So, what does authenticity actually look like when you have those pressures, you have to get those targets, and then you have rejection and people scheming on you in a mix of things?
Yeah, you can have some intrusive thoughts when you're having bad months and bad years and your paychecks are dwindling, even though you're putting the same amount of work in or more. And you learn very quickly that you are not paid hourly on the work you do in sales. You
Mm,
are paid by the revenue you generate for a company.
mm,
And I think that's
uh-huh.
fair. And that means also it's going to be cyclical and you're not always
Yeah.
going to be doing that because there'll be different pressures, there'll be higher quotas, there'll be a lot of things. And to the original point, dark thoughts start to come in where you like,
Mm,
well, if I just tell him this, maybe he'll do the deal. But
mm,
it's not the correct thing to do for that customer. And where you start and you always have to have as your baseline fundamental thing is integrity for what you are selling and what you are providing to the market. And that's to yourself and to the product and to the company. Once you start manipulating people, once you start lying to them, once you start falsifying information in order to get a sale, you are going down a dark path because it might work
mm,
to some degree for a little while. Trust me, it will all catch up to you, but it might work for a little while. And if you start to do that, you are going
Yeah.
down a path that is a dangerous one to do. And if you catch yourself doing it, turn around and get back to what brought you to where you are, not where you're going. And integrity is a huge part of that. And you have to keep yourself accountable to this
Mm,
because you can hide it once you get into this industry. You can hide it and manipulate things, and it's just not a good place to be living in the weeds of that. So you have to have your own personal integrity that you hold yourself accountable to. And the
mhm,
one thing I always say, I will say it again, and I live by this. If you were to run into the person you just sold something to next week on the street, would you walk up and shake their hand or would you turn and hide? And if the answer is
mm,
you would turn the corner so they didn't see you, then you have done the wrong thing.
yeah, 100%.
And that doesn't mean things work out rosy when you did everything you could for the customer and did the right thing. But you can
Yeah,
have some accountability and say, if you know you did the right thing and it just didn't work out, you can have that conversation with the person. I've been yelled at for something that I sold to people. I've been yelled at countless times, but I knew that
mm,
I was doing it from the right place. And I can
yeah,
have that conversation. I can say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it didn't work out. I was doing what I felt was best for you. And I'm sorry it didn't work out. And
mm,
and have that acknowledgement. Then turning and hiding and not picking up the phone when he calls because I know I lied to that person and now it's coming to fruition and hiding and deleting and not answering. Emails stack up. It will catch up to you. So you
yeah,
have to be willing to have that conversation and say, listen, I did this from the right place. I truly believe that. And 99% of the time you do that, it will work out. And the times it doesn't, you can at least know that you were coming from the right place, and just it just didn't work out as planned. Which, from your background, that happens. The best laid plans can go awry, but they were
yeah.
done with from the right place.
In my profession, especially with senior leaders at the Pentagon level and higher, they usually come out with like books. They were like, "Hey, this is my recommendation for books that I'm reading this year." And I usually go through those books and read them and then get a gauge of where they are mentally and their philosophy and how they see life, right? And so I did the same thing with you, and I looked through your book recommendations, and quite surprisingly, they range from negotiations to habits on generalism and relationship building.
Mhm.
What does those choices reveal about your sales philosophy?
Yeah, it just means that there's no one size fits all with how you sell
Mhm.
and how you do this. You have to. I'm fascinated by human behavior. I'm fascinated by body language, nonverbal communication. I'm fascinated with negotiation conversations. I'm fascinated with sales techniques. I'm fascinated with like hearing the human side of successful people, roadblocks that they've overcome, how they did it, how they kept their composure in difficult situations. Like the one of the books that one of my favorite books is Never Split the Difference, and that's hostage negotiation.
Mhm.
And then he relates it to Chris Foster is the author, great book, and how he related that to sales and how he related that to he took life or death situations and related it to the most fundamental human levels of everyday life, which was
Mhm.
fascinating. And then another one that I love is Atomic Habits and how you're building up you know, these incremental benefits that small changes can make and develop. And I think that's sales 101, but that also applies to different parts of your life, whether it be from your own routines, your own mindsets, your own if you're trying to get back in shape, if you're trying to change your any habit, taking these grand ideas and putting it to the everyday level that any person can learn something from it. And then I always try to relate that back to my own career and my own, life outside of it as well, because I'm a big advocate that the way you are in your everyday life is going to translate and overlap to your career as well. Like you don't just like I kind of talk about it in my book. I'm like habits that you introduce into your life into your career should kind of start to bleed into your own life. Like if I have to
Mhm.
be more organized at work and be more punctual and better response times, well, I can't just be on time or early for every work meeting and then be late, for my kid's soccer game
Yep.
all the time because I don't prioritize it properly, or I'm late to meet my friends when we had a set time. Like it
Mm.
should be all encompassing, right? To the habits
Yeah.
that you want to do. But to get to the book stuff, I don't think that you can just sit there and read just sales books. You have to You have to become a better, more fluid person, and that's gonna, again, bleed into
Okay.
your career and vice versa.
Bryan, one, I like to say thank you. Is it anything that you would like to share? The floor is yours.
Well, the yeah, I'm very passionate about sales, about helping others that are getting in this career. But I hope too that some of this stuff, if you're not in sales and listening to this, that this is meant to be something you can implement into your own career or your own life. I hope, and knowing that you can pivot and change up your own identity and incorporate these little things. Maybe you took one thing from this, hopefully, from this whole conversation, and just implement that and work on that. That's what I'm going. And if you are in sales, that's how you build your own career and become a professional in this. And I guess I'll mention it because you've mentioned it, but this is the book that I have on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Pitching Sales: A Complete Guide to Become a Sales Profession. It's only 110 pages. It's more of a guidebook that I
Mhm.
did. It's supposed to be read in 1 or 2 nights, and really just a foundational start for somebody who's dabbled in the idea of starting sales, or they're already in it and they're maybe struggling a little bit, or if they are in it, just give it a read and maybe you take one. Again, I'm a big advocate, just take at least one thing from any interaction or something that you're doing outside of, like, if they're listening to this podcast, they're already on the right path.
Yeah.
So there's the next thing you can do, and the next thing, and the next thing. And I just think that's how you build that life and career that you're looking for.
Bryan, I truly, truly appreciate this. Appreciate you for being on the show. You brought honesty to the field. People usually reduce to like tactics and strategies. I really think what comes through today is that there's a human side to becoming a real professional in sales. So thank you for the clarity, your candor, and your time here. Appreciate you. And everyone who's listening, please go to his website, go and buy his book, Pitching Sales. It's a wonderful book, a wonderful read. It's more than just sales. He does it, like he said, it is a guide, but it's more than just sales in there. He talks about being just a better human being in totality. So appreciate you, Bryan. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I can talk about this, sales and life for hours. So I always enjoy it, and I thank you for having me on this podcast. I've really enjoyed it.
No problem. See you guys.
Thank you.